The ship was silent, except for the groan of cooling metal and the faint hiss of a leaking pipe. The violent roll had turned the grit into a broken home. Corridors were now vertical shafts. Consoles hung from what used to be walls. The crew moved slowly, checking on each other in the dim emergency lighting. Captain Lee Day felt a sharp pain in his ribs with every breath. A broken rib, probably. He ignored it. On the main screen, which was now sideways, the view was different. The sea of swarm was gone from around them, replaced by a wide, terrible smear of crushed and twitching biomass. But the sensors showed the larger picture. The swarm was not defeated. It was pulling back, regrouping, but it was also doing something new. It was all flowing towards the great crystal city on the horizon, the one place with a strong pulsing energy signature left on the planet. "It's calling them," Choi Min-ji said, her voice tired. She pointed at the screen. "That signal from the city. It's the swarm's core. Its brain." It was hiding, eating the planet's central power source. Now it's showing itself. It's gathering every last piece to finish us. Kim Tae-seok limped onto the bridge, his arm in a makeshift sling. He looked at the signal data. It's a beautiful frequency. Complex, layered, adaptive. It's how it controls all the pieces. A perfect harmonic song. And if that song stops? Lee Day asked, his voice rough. Kim shrugged his good shoulder. Then the choir goes silent. The pieces might keep moving on instinct for a bit, but with no direction. They'll fall apart. It's the heart. We cut out the heart. Sergeant Park Ji-hai climbed up a ladder that was now a horizontal rail. Her face was smeared with grime, and a cut on her forehead was sealed with a black medical patch. So we go there. We kill it. Lee Day looked at his ship. The grit would not fly again. Not for a long time. It was a piece of scrap metal now. But it had done its job. It had gotten them here, and it had broken the swarm's first real attack. We can't fly, and walking would take days. By then, that thing will have built a fortress around itself. Kim's eyes lit up. He looked not at the ship, but at the wreckage around them. We don't need to fly, Captain. We just need to move. In a straight line, fast. He pointed out the viewport towards the city. And we have a lot of fuel left in the main reactor. The one you wanted to use for an EMP. Lee Day followed his gaze. The idea was insane. It was also the only one they had. You want to turn the wreck of my ship into a bomb. Not just a bomb, Kim said, his energy returning. A delivery system. A big, fast, ugly delivery system. We overload the reactor, create a massive, dirty electromagnetic pulse. It will fry every complex circuit in a 5-kilometer radius, including that beautiful, singing brain. But the pulse has to be right on top of it. The swarm will throw everything at us if we try to walk there. But if we go in a straight line, fast in this, he patted the sideways wall of the bridge. They can't stop us. We're too heavy. Park Ji-hai nodded slowly. A final charge. We ram the city, and when we're deep inside, we blow the reactor. It will kill the core, Choi said softly. But it will also kill every piece of technology we have left. The ship, our suit systems. Everything electronic will be fried. We will be stuck there, in the dark. Lee Day looked at each of them. Park, the soldier. Kim, the engineer. Choi, the communicator. They were bruised, battered, but their eyes were clear. They had come to help. This was what help looked like when there were no pretty options left. We send the plan to Ambassador Narelle, Lee Day decided. We tell them to get their people as far underground as possible, away from anything that uses power. Then we do it. The message was sent, simple and direct. The Niverian response was a single chiming word. Understood. The next hour was a blur of brutal work. They moved through their sideways home, preparing for the end of the ride. They gathered simple tools, water, basic medical supplies, and physical weapons knives, the butt of a coil gun, anything that would work without power. They wore their suits, but knew the electronics would soon be dead. Kim Tae-seok worked in the shattered engine room, his good hand rerouting cables. He bypassed every safety protocol. He wired the reactor to overload on a simple timer, a mechanical clockwork device he pulled from an old ship's log. No electronics for the swarm to disrupt. 30 minutes from when I started, he said. That should give us enough time to get there. Lee Day went to the only set of controls that still had power, the maneuvering thrusters, on the side of the ship that was now facing the city. He would have to fire them all at once, at maximum, to get the huge wreck moving. It would be a wild, uncontrollable slide. All hands to the forward crash couches and strap in, Lee Day ordered over the comms. This is the last ride. They strapped themselves into chairs that were now sideways. The ship was silent, waiting. Lee Day took a deep breath, ignoring the pain in his chest. Kim, start the clock. In engineering, Kim turned the mechanical timer. A loud click echoed in the silent room. A heavy gear began to turn. 30 minutes. Clock is running. Lee Day fired the thrusters. The grit did not lift off. It scraped and screamed along the ground, a monstrous piece of debris pushed by its own dying breath. It gained speed slowly, then faster, plowing through the crystal plain, heading straight for the distant city. The swarm, still regrouping, saw it coming. It threw itself at the moving wreck. Tendrils and hardened projectiles slammed into the hull, but the ship's momentum was too great. It crushed everything in its path, a blunt, unstoppable force. Inside, the crew was shaken violently. They held on, teeth rattling. The city grew larger on the view screen. The central spire, where the swarm's core pulsed with stolen light, glowed like a 6-star dot. The swarm built walls in front of them. The grit smashed through them. It built barriers of fused crystal. The grit, 1,000 tons of human stubbornness, shattered them. Nothing elegant, nothing clever, just mass and speed and a single, simple goal. With a final, ear-splitting shriek of tearing metal, the grit plowed into the base of the central spire. It kept going, collapsing crystal halls and swarm structures, coming to a final, crumpled stop deep in the heart of the city, right under the glowing core. Dust and debris billowed. Silence. Then, the clicking of harness releases. The crew climbed out, using handholds in the dark. Their suit lights, still working for now, cut through the dust. They stood in the wreck of their ship, looking up through a hole torn in the ceiling. Above them, hanging in a web of stolen energy and biomass, was the core of the Devourer swarm, a huge, pulsing organ of light and flesh, singing its complex. Terrible song. Kim checked the mechanical timer in his hand. 5 minutes. Everyone out of the ship, Lee Day ordered. Now, as far as we can get. They climbed out of the broken hull into a vast, cavernous space. The air hummed with power. The swarm core above them pulsed, sensing the threat, but unable to move. Around them, the remaining swarm biomass began to crawl towards them, but it was slow, confused without the core's direct command. They ran, not away, but deeper into the crystal city, away from the ship. Their suit lights began to flicker as the reactor built towards its overload. With a minute left, they found a deep natural fissure in the crystal floor and dropped into it. Pressing themselves against the cold, non-conductive stone, the world ended in light and silence. There was no sound. A wave of pure, invisible force washed out from the grit. Every light in the city, the core's stolen glow, the swarm's bioluminescence, their own suit lights went out instantly. The humming song stopped as if cut by a knife. The air itself seemed to crackle and then go still. Total, perfect blackness. And quiet. The clicks and pulses of the swarm were gone. The only sounds were their own breathing inside their helmets. And then, as their suit systems died, the rasp of their own lungs in the sudden, cool air. Li Day fumbled at his neck, releasing the seals on his dead helmet. He lifted it off. The air was clean, with a faint smell of ozone and dust. No sweetness. The harmony was gone, broken. One by one, the others removed their helmets. They sat in the dark, listening. No movement. No song. Just the faint, distant trickle of water. After a long time, a soft, natural light began to filter down from above. The Niverian sun rising. It lit the fissure with a gentle, pale glow. They climbed out. The city was a ruin, but a silent one. The great core was a dark, shriveled mass, hanging lifeless. All around, the swarm biomass lay inert, like gray clay, already beginning to dry and crack. From the shadows, figures emerged. Tall, delicate Niverians. At their front was Ambassador Nareo. They walked slowly over the rubble, their luminous eyes wide. They stopped before the humans, who stood in their dirty, damaged suits, their faces tired and smudged. Nareo looked at the dead core. They looked at the wreck of the grit, a tomb of metal in the heart of their city. They looked at the humans, who had saved their world by breaking it. "You have silenced the devourer," Nareo said, their voice a soft chime in the quiet. "You broke the great song to save the singers." Captain Li Day looked at his crew. At Park, who stood straight, watching the horizon. At Kim, who was already poking a piece of dead swarm with his boot. At Choi, who was looking at the sky, perhaps thinking of home. "We did what we had to do," Li Day said. His simple words hung in the simple, quiet air. The Deathworlders had answered the call. They had come. They had fought with the only tools they truly trusted: strength, stubbornness. The silence after the explosion did not last. The swarm, for all its alien nature, understood a fundamental truth. The humans were a threat that could not be ignored. Across the planet, the gray tides changed direction. They flowed away from the half-eaten crystal cities and the shimmering forests, pulling back from their feast. They moved like rivers of oil, reversing their course, all converging on the single, ugly scar where the grit sat. From the bridge, the sensor screens told the clear, terrifying story. Choi Min-ji watched the data, her face pale under the screen's glow. "Captain, we are seeing a massive concentration of biosignatures moving towards our position. From all directions. They're abandoning every other objective." Li Day studied the tactical display. It was a siege. The swarm was coming to drown them in sheer numbers. "They've decided we're the main course," he said, his voice dry. "Sergeant Park, pull your squad back to the ship. We're switching to a defensive posture. This hull is the best bunker we have." Outside, Park Ji-hai gave the order. Her squad, which had been pushing cautiously into the forest, turned and moved back in good order. They did not run. They walked backward, weapons facing the trees, covering each other. They could see the forest itself seeming to darken as the swarm poured into it from behind, filling the spaces between the singing crystals with a silent, churning mass. The first new wave hit before they were halfway back. It did not flow slowly this time. It launched itself. Tendrils of biomass hardened into sharp spikes, shot from the tree line like spears. One struck a soldier in the chest, throwing him off his feet. His suit alarm shrieked a puncture warning. "Kim, on me!" Park yelled, dropping to a knee and firing her coil gun at the source of the spikes. blowing apart a large, pulsating node. Specialist Kim Tae-seok, who had come out to assist with sensors, scrambled to the fallen soldier. He saw the spike, made of sharpened crystal and bone, embedded in the chest plate. Acid was sizzling at the edges. "Don't pull it," Kim shouted, slapping a thick sealant patch from his belt over the puncture. The foam hardened instantly, gluing the spike in place and stopping the leak. "It's plugging the hole. Get him inside now." Two other soldiers grabbed their wounded comrade and began dragging him towards the ramp. The rest of the squad formed a tight circle, firing continuously. The air filled with the deafening cracks of their weapons and the wet tearing sounds of the swarm being ripped apart. But for every piece they destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. The swarm was learning to use distance, to throw things. "Covering fire," Park ordered, and the squad laid down a storm of metal, allowing them to finally reach the foot of the Grit's ramp. They scrambled up, the last one, Park herself, turning to fire a final burst before hitting the switch. The heavy ramp began to close with a hydraulic whine. A tendril of swarm, moving faster than anything they'd seen, shot into the closing gap. Park didn't hesitate. She drew a long, heavy combat knife from her leg and brought it down, severing the tendril with a brutal chop. The gray flesh writhed on the deck for a moment before going still. The ramp sealed shut with a final solid clang dot inside. The sounds of the siege became muffled thumps and scrapes against the hull. The ship groaned under the pressure. Lee Day's command was calm. All external vents and portals sealed. Switch to internal recycling. They'll try to find a way in. They'll try to eat through. For hours, it was a waiting game. The thumping and scraping was constant. Then, a new sound started, a high-pitched, grinding whine. Kim, monitoring the hull integrity from engineering, cursed. "They've concentrated on the starboard engine nacelle, the one that was hit on descent. The plating is weaker there. They're grinding, using hardened pieces of digested crystal like saws. They're literally trying to chew through the hull." Lee Day made a decision. They couldn't just sit and be eaten. "Choi, can you get a drone out through the primary airlock tube?" "The small service one." "I can try, Captain," Choi said. "But the second it emerges—" "I know. I just need its eyes for a moment. I need to see what we're dealing with." The small, spherical service drone shot out of a narrow tube on the ship's top side. Its camera feed lasted 8 seconds. In that time, they saw a nightmare. The Grit was covered. A living, pulsating blanket of the swarm engulfed it completely, like fungus on a log. The beautiful Niverian plain was gone, replaced by a sea of gray. And at the starboard engine, the mass was thickest. A swirling vortex of activity as the swarm focused its collective will on breaking in. The feed died as the drone was consumed. "They're not just attacking," Kim said, his earlier humor gone. "They're mining us." Another alarm blared, this one sharper. "Breach, starboard nacelle, Sector 7? Hull integrity compromised." The computer's voice was calm, which made it worse. On the internal monitors, they could see the gray, sticky biomass beginning to ooze into the engine room through a gash no wider than a hand. It immediately started spreading across the walls, seeking conduits, wires, anything with energy. "That's it," Lee Day said, standing up. His face was set. "We cannot hold here. Sergeant Park, get your team to the engine room. Stop that breach at all costs. Contain it. Choi, plot me a course." "Course, Captain?" Choi asked, confused. "We are grounded. The engines are damaged and covered in that." "Not for flight," Lee Day said, his eyes on the main screen, on the image of the swarm vortex at their weakest point. "I need the shortest path, maximum impact. We're going to move the ship." Understanding dawned on Kim's face, followed by a wild grin. A plow. You want to use the ship as a plow. If they want to eat us while we sit still, we won't sit still, Lee Day said. Park, once you've secured that breach, I need you in the forward cargo bay. There are high-tension cables and manual winches there. You're going to need to lash everything down. This will not be a gentle move. In the engine room, the situation was dire. The oozing swarm had already consumed a secondary control console, its lights flickering and dying. Park and her squad entered, weapons ready. But shooting inside the ship was dangerous. Instead, they used industrial cutters and welding torches. They severed the creeping tendrils, then blasted the severed ends with the torches, cauterizing them with simple, brutal heat. The swarm recoiled from the open flame. They shoved hardened insulation foam into the gash in the hull, sealing it temporarily. It was messy, desperate work. Breach is contained, Captain, Park reported, her suit smeared with acidic residue and foam. For now. Good. Get to the cargo bay? Now. Throughout the ship, the crew secured everything they could. They used straps, cables, even welded critical systems to the deck. Lee Day sat back in the command chair. All hands brace for impact. This will be rough. He took the controls. The ship's main drives were damaged, but the maneuvering thrusters buried in the hull were still functional. He fired them all at once, at full power, on the port side only. The grit, a mountain of metal and grief, shuddered. Then, with a sound of tearing metal and crushing biomass, it began to roll onto its side. The swarm covering it was caught by surprise. Thousands of tons of starships slammed into the ground, crushing the swarm beneath it. The ship didn't stop. Lee Day kept the thrusters firing, pushing the ship sideways. Using its own mass as a weapon, the grit became a blunt, sideways plow, carving a horrific, smearing trench through the heart of the swarm concentration. The noise was indescribable, a grinding, crushing, wet cacophony. Inside, the crew were thrown violently against their restraints. Anything not secured went flying. For 50 meters, the ship scraped and slid, until the thrusters sputtered and died, their fuel exhausted. Finally, it came to a stop, lying partly on its side, surrounded by a vast, flattened, twitching smear of what had been the swarm's main force. Silence fell again, this time deeper. The constant thumping was gone. Lee Day unbuckled himself, his body aching. Status reports. Slowly, the reports came in. Injuries, but no more deaths. The hull was in terrible shape, but it had held. The swarm around them was in disarray, its central concentration utterly destroyed. But as the dust settled, a single, powerful energy signature began to pulse from the direction of the largest remaining crystal city. It was a call, clear and strong. The swarm, all across the planet, had a new target. It had found the brain, and it was angry. The Deathworlders had won the battle. They had broken the siege with a move of shocking, simple violence. But the war was not over. The grit was now a wreck, stranded on its side, and the final act was still to come. The simple, loud perimeter held. The swarm pulled back, not in defeat, but in a rippling, confused retreat into the shimmering crystal forest. It left behind a field littered with twitching, separated chunks of itself, and the deep scars of kinetic impacts in the Niverian soil. For the first time since the Devourer came, a patch of ground had been taken back. Inside the grit, now a grounded fortress, the mood was not of celebration, but of focused work. Kin Tae-seok had his sample. He stood in the small, sealed lab area, his canister locked inside a clear, thick-walled isolation box. The piece of swarm inside was no longer a terrifying force of nature. It was a subject. He watched it through the box. It pushed against the walls, formless, trying to find a weakness. It excreted its acid, which did little more than fog the transparent material. It tried to send out a faint, pulsing energy signal, a call for help. Kim's equipment, built to withstand the radiation of a dying star, blocked it easily. "Fascinating," Kim muttered, his voice echoing in his helmet. He spoke over the internal comms to the bridge, where Captain Lee Day and Corporal Choi Min-ji monitored everything. "It's a clever little brute, but it's a specialist. It's built to eat the Concorde's food. Not ours." "What do you mean, specialist?" Lee Day's voice was calm. Kim tapped data onto a screen. "Look here. Its primary corrosive agent is for breaking down complex organic silicate bonds and refined energy matrices. The stuff Niverian crystals and lumen energy shields are made of. Our suits are ceramic composite and hardened steel. Our ship's hull is titanium carbide alloy. It's like it's trying to bite through a mountain with teeth made for eating jelly. It'll wear us down, but it'll take forever." On the bridge, Lee Day processed this. "A hard nut to crack. Good. And its behavior?" Choi Min-ji answered, pulling up data from her drone flights. "It's hive-minded, Captain. The pieces on the ground are still trying to communicate. The signal is a complex modulated frequency. When I fly a drone broadcasting a simple, powerful radio burst, it goes crazy trying to get it. It craves structured energy. It's like an addict." Sergeant Park Ji-i's voice cut in from the perimeter. "Captain, we're seeing movement deeper in the trees. It's not coming at us again. It's gathering, and it's changing." On the tactical screen, the heat signatures showed the swarm pooling around the largest crystal structures in the forest. Then the structures began to dim and crumble. The swarm was consuming them, not just for food, but for material. "They're learning," Kim said, a note of professional respect in his voice. "They know simple biomass and light alloys won't cut it. They're trying to build something heavier." Lee Day stood up. The time for simple defense was over. They needed to push, to break the swarm's will before it could adapt fully. "Sergeant Park, prepare a probing attack. We need to see what it's building." "Specialist Kim, I need options." "Not for defense. For attack." Kim's mind raced. He looked at his data. The swarm loved complex energy. It was its food, its communication, its weakness. "A trap," he said. "We give it a feast it can't resist. And then we give it a stomach ache it will never forget." While Park's squad checked their gear and prepared to move out, Kim and Choi worked. The plan was ugly in its simplicity. They took one of the ship's backup power cells, a dense block of humming energy. Then, using parts from the ship's repair stores, they built a cage around it. Not an energy cage. A physical one, made of scrap metal and wires. They attached every chemical high explosive charge they could spare to the outside of the cage. "We make it broadcast aloud. Beautiful, complex energy signature," Kim explained to Lee Day, his hands moving quickly. "The swarm will have to come for it. It's the perfect meal. When it tries to eat, it will engulf the cage. The explosives are simple chemical triggers. No fancy electronics for it to disrupt. The swarm touches the cage, it completes a basic physical circuit. And boom, the power cell goes up with it. A bomb," Lee Day said. "A very simple bomb wrapped in a very tasty candy shell," Kim corrected with a grim smile. Outside, Park and her squad moved into the crystal forest. The beauty of it was heartbreaking up close. The trees sang a soft, sad song as the wind passed through their fracturing branches. The ground was covered in a fine, glittering dust, the remains of what had been consumed. They moved carefully, their heavy boots crunching on the crystal debris. Park signaled for a halt. Ahead, through the shimmering trunks, they saw it. The swarm had indeed built something. Using the digested crystal and metal, it had formed a rough, spiked wall. Embedded in the wall were pulsating organic nodes that glowed with a stolen, sickly light. It was a barrier, crude but solid, and it was between them and a large, still glowing crystal spire, a major energy source the swarm had not yet finished consuming. "Report," Li Day's voice came in her ear. "It's building fortifications, Captain," Park whispered. "Primitive, but effective. It's trying to become more like us, using solid matter as a shield." On the bridge, Li Day and Kim exchanged a look. The swarm was learning from them, just as Kim was learning from it. It was an arms race now, a brutal, simple one. "Pull back to the ship, Sergeant," Li Day ordered. "We have a delivery to make." Back at the grit, the candy shell bomb was ready. It was a crude, ugly thing, a mess of wires and metal strapped to the glowing power cell. Choi Min-ji prepared a remote drone, not to broadcast a signal, but to carry the heavy device. The drone, straining under the weight, lifted off from the grit's ramp. Choi piloted it with steady hands, flying low and fast over the crystal plain toward the forest. On her screen, she saw the swarm's new wall and the pulsing energy of the spire behind it. "That spire is the dinner bell," Kim said, watching over her shoulder. "Drop the package right at the base of the wall. Let them smell it." The drone shot into the forest. Immediately, tendrils of swarm shot up from the ground, drawn to the drone's engines. But it was moving too fast. It weaved between the crystal trees, reaching the newly built wall. With a final burst of power, it rose up and dumped its cargo. The heavy bomb landed with a thud against the gray, pulsating barrier. The drone turned to flee. A whip of biomass lashed out, snagging one of its rotors. The screen spun wildly, then went black. "Drone is lost," Choi reported, her voice flat. They waited. For a minute, nothing happened. Then the swarm reacted. The gray biomass near the wall flowed over the bomb, investigating the powerful, delicious energy signature coming from within the metal cage. It began to envelop it, pulling the device into the wall itself. "Now," Kim whispered Dot. He pressed a large, physical button on a simple control box. There was no signal to jam. It just completed a circuit. The forest flashed, not with the clean light of a plasma explosion, but with a sudden violet, orange, and black fireball. The sound reached the grit a second later, a deep, satisfying thump that shook the ground. The swarm's newly built wall vanished in the blast. Chunks of burning biomass and shattered crystal rained down for hundreds of meters. The glowing spire behind it, now exposed, flickered and went dark. Its energy source severed. On the bridge, everyone watched the sensor screen. The swarm's coordinated signals in that area dissolved into frantic, panicked noise. Then they went silent. "It worked," Choi said, a little surprised. "It didn't like having its mouth blown off," Kim replied, sitting back. "It understands energy. It doesn't understand that." From her position at the edge of the forest, Park Ji-hai watched the smoke rise. The song of the crystals here had stopped, replaced by the crackle of fire and the hiss of dying swarm tissue. It was not a clean victory. It was an ugly, scorched scar. But it was a victory. A soft, chime-like voice came over the open channel. It was Ambassador Narale. The Niverian's voice was full of a new, strange emotion. "You destroyed the harmony of the place to save the place itself." Li Day looked at the feed of the burning forest, then at the faces of his crew, tired, smudged, but determined. "Ambassador," he said slowly, "sometimes to save the patient, you must cut out the sickness, even if it hurts." The silence from the swarm was not permanent. They could feel it, a shift in the air. The mindless consumption was over. Now it was paying attention. Now it knew it was in a fight. And across the planet, the gray biomass began to move with a new singular purpose, flowing away from other targets, converging towards the simple, hard, loud problem that had planted its. The grit tore through the atmosphere like a throne rock. It did not slow with grace. It used the planet's own thick air as a brake, the hull screaming in protest, the scorched patches from the swarm's plasma glowing a dull red. Inside, the crew was slammed into their harnesses. Gravity pulled at them, a familiar and brutal force. Captain Lee Day watched the main screen, his jaw tight. The view was a nightmare of beauty and ruin. Below, the Niverian surface was a tapestry of glittering crystal forests and soft blue rivers. But across this beauty, the devourer swarm lay like a weeping wound. It was a moving carpet of gray and sickly green, pulsating as it consumed. It flowed over a crystalline city, reducing soaring, delicate spires to dull, crumbling powder. It was methodical, and it was fast. Ambassador Nariel's voice came through the comms again, thin with static and fear. Human vessel, the primary spaceport harmonics are still intact. Please dock at the central spire. We can offer you protection. For a time. Sergeant Park Ji-hai, already standing and checking her heavy combat suit, shook her head. Captain, that spire is a perfect target. It's also likely full of swarm by now. They'd eat the ship the second we locked down. Lee Day agreed. He had seen the tactical feed. The swarm was attracted to complexity, to energy signatures. The Niverian spaceport would be a beacon. Negative, Ambassador. We are making our own landing site. Please direct your people away from the coordinates we are sending you. It will not be safe. He nodded to Choi Min-ji. The corporal sent a simple set of map coordinates, a wide, flat plain of hard mineral crust near the dying city, devoid of the large crystal growths that characterized the planet. A simple place. The grit adjusted its course, ignoring the beautiful, vulnerable docks. The swarm seemed to notice this change. Tendrils of the pulsing biomass detached from the ground and reached up, like the arms of a drowning man. More bolts of bioplasma streaked up towards them. Evasive pattern beta, Lee Day ordered. The grit was not a nimble ship. Its evasion was a slow, heavy roll, presenting its armored belly to the fire. More hits connected. The ship shuddered. An alarm wailed in engineering. Secondary coolant line is hit. Kim Tae-siak's voice was calm, but loud over the din. Sealing it off. Switching to tertiary. We're fine. Just don't ask for a hot shower anytime soon. From her shuttle, Narail watched in horrified awe. The human ship was being hit, repeatedly, and it was not exploding. It was not singing a song of harmonic defense. It was just taking the damage, a beast enduring stings as it charged. The concept was alien. In Niverian thought, a thing was either perfect and whole, or it was broken. This ship existed in a third state, functional but battered. It was a new idea. The grit reached its chosen point. It did not land softly on repulsor fields. It fired heavy retro thrusters, blasting the plane below with fire and fury, scorching the ground in a wide circle. Then it dropped the last 10 meters with a final ground-shaking crunch. The landing struts compressed with a groan of metal. They held. Planetside, Lee Day announced, unstrapping. Park, you are clear for deployment. Secure the perimeter. Simple and wide. In the belly of the ship, Sergeant Park Ji-hai faced her squad. They were 8 men and women, all in the same bulky suits, their faces behind transparent, impact-resistant visors. Their weapons were large, blocky, and physical. Listen up, Park said, her voice firm in their helmet comms. We have seen the feeds. This thing eats fancy tech. so we don't give it fancy. Coil guns on standard solid shot. No plasma, no lasers. Grenades are fragmentation, high explosive. Simple shrapnel. We move as a unit. We watch each other's backs. If it looks like it's thinking, you shoot it. If it's bigger than a rover, you blow it up. Our job is to make a safe zone for the specialists. Understood? A series of short, sharp confirmations came back. The ramp of the grit hissed open, revealing the alien world. The air was clean and carried a strange, sweet smell, like sugar and ozone. The light was gentle. It was, Park thought, a very soft world. The ground near the ship was scorched black. Beyond that, the crystal trees began, shimmering softly in the light, singing a faint, sad song in the breeze. It did not last. The movement started at the edge of the crystal forest. The gray biomass of the swarm flowed out from between the trees. It moved like thick oil, pulling itself along. Parts of it looked biological, glistening sinew and snapping tendrils. Other parts were made of half-digested metal and crystal, jagged and sharp. It had no eyes, but it seemed to sense them, flowing directly toward the grit. Contact front, Park said, her voice flat. She raised her coil gun, the weapon humming as it charged. Fire at will. The silence of the Niverian plain was shattered by a sound the planet had never known. The sharp, deafening crack of supersonic kinetic weapons. Solid tungsten slugs, each the size of a finger, tore into the leading edge of the swarm. The effect was immediate and messy. Where energy beams had been absorbed or deflected, the kinetic slugs simply ripped through. Chunks of biomass were torn free, splattering onto the pristine ground. The swarm recoiled, the entire front of it churning in confusion. It was not a fatal blow, but it was a shock. The swarm was used to fighting enemies who tried to disrupt it. This enemy was simply tearing pieces off. "Keep it up," Park ordered, walking forward, her squad flanking her. They advanced with a terrible, steady pace, firing in controlled bursts. The swarm tried to adapt. It formed a thicker, harder carapace from the digested metal in its mass. The next round of slugs sparked as they hit, but they still dented and cracked the armor, the sheer force blasting pieces away. From the open ramp of the grit, Kim Tae-seok and Choi Min-ji watched. Kim held a large, heavily shielded canister. "It's learning," he said, "trying to make a shell. But it's using what it ate from the Concorde. Light alloys, fancy ceramics. Nothing like our slugs." Choi Min-ji operated a drone. It was a simple, rugged machine, little more than a camera and a small speaker on rotors. She flew it over the swarm, broadcasting a powerful, scrambled radio signal. The swarm immediately reacted to the new energy source, several tendrils lashing up at the drone. "It's definitely attracted to complex emissions," she reported. "It ignores simple background radiation. It wants focused energy." Captain Lee Day's voice came over the command channel. "Park, what's your status?" "We are holding them at the tree line, Captain," Park replied, firing another round. The slug punched through a newly formed metal plate and exploded the pulsing core behind it. "Their defenses are fancy. Ours are not." It seems confused. Lee Day looked at the feed from Choi's drone. He saw the swarm churning, pulling back from the relentless kinetic assault, then surging forward again. It was testing them. An idea, ugly and simple, formed in his mind. "Specialist Kim," Lee Day said. "You wanted a sample. Time to get one. Sergeant Park, provide cover. We need to see this thing up close." Park didn't question the order. "Squad, focus fire on the left flank. We're going to isolate a piece." The coil gun fire intensified, shearing off a large, wriggling mass of the swarm from the main body. forcing it into a shallow depression in the ground. Kim Tae-seok, canister in hand, jumped down from the ramp and jogged forward. His own lighter suit making him faster. The isolated swarm mass sensed him. It flowed toward him, a wave of snapping jaws and acidic drips. Park and another soldier fired, not at the main mass, but at the ground in front of it, blasting up a curtain of dirt and rock, slowing it. Kim reached the edge of the depression. The swarm lashed out with a whip-like tendril. It struck his leg, sizzling against the suit's ceramic plating. An alarm beeped in his helmet. Acid contact. Analyzing. pH is approximately 4.2. That's it? He almost laughed. Captain, its corrosive agent is weaker than my morning coffee. It's not made for heavy metals and ceramics. He pushed the canister's open end into the wriggling biomass and activated a powerful suction mechanism. A chunk of the swarm, about the size of a football, was torn free and sealed inside the heavily shielded container. It thrashed against the walls, trying to corrode them. Failing. Kim jogged back to the ship. His Park squad laid down covering fire, pushing the main swarm back further. The message was being sent, not in harmonics, but in brute force physics. This ground is ours. High above, in the fragile shuttle, Ambassador Narail and other Niverians watched the sensor feeds. They saw the gray swarm, which had consumed their greatest works, being halted not by a song of power, but by a wall of noise, fire, and simple, violent impact. They saw the human in the heavy suit let the swarm strike him, then casually take a piece of it prisoner. Narail turned to their aid, their luminous eyes wide. "They are not fighting the Devourer's song," Narail whispered, the melody of their voice trembling. "They are breaking its instruments. With hammers." The galaxy's gentle request for help had been answered. The help had arrived, and it was covered in mud, scorch marks, and the blood of its enemy. The Deathworlders were not just here. They were working. The silence of deep space was not a quiet thing. It was a vast, humming emptiness, filled with the whisper of cosmic dust and the faint, ancient echoes of dead stars. On the bridge of the United Nations Sole Command Vessel Grit, this silence was broken by the steady, rhythmic beep of a priority alert. It was a sound Captain Lee Day had learned to dread over his long career. He was a man who carried his years heavily. His face was lined not just with age, but with the strain of command under the harsh light of alien suns. His dark eyes, fixed on the main screen, were the color of wet stone. The message scrolling before him was a patchwork of chaos, a distress signal compiled from a dozen different, more advanced species. It was a symphony of panic, sent on an old, robust frequency band that human equipment could just barely decipher. Lee Day read the summary. The Niverian Haven World. A place described as a paradise of singing crystal and gentle, intelligent flora. It was under attack by something called the Devourer Swarm. The report spoke of elegant fleets shattered, of energy shields failing like soap bubbles, of entire species' finest warriors being consumed. The Galactic Concord, the great alliance of civilized beings, was desperate. Their last, unified cry for help had been broadcast across every channel, even this primitive one. "They're asking for anyone," said Specialist Kim Tae-seok from his engineering station. He was younger, his face still holding a sharp, clever brightness. He tapped a screen, pulling up distorted visuals. "Look at this. The Lumen's light cruisers. Just eaten. The Xyle's silicate hulls. Cracked and drained like eggshells. Whatever this swarm is, it eats advanced tech for breakfast." Sergeant Park Ji-hai stood near the tactical display, her arms crossed. She was solid where Kim was lean, a calm presence in any storm. Her gaze was analytical, moving over the images of the swarm, a shifting, oily mass of biological and mechanical parts. "It eats them. But what does it do with them?" "Assimilates," Kim said with a morbid grin. takes their best tricks and uses them. An adaptive hive mind. Nasty. And they've asked us? Corporal Choi Minji asked from communications. She was methodical, her fingers pausing over her console. We just got FTL a generation ago. Our biggest diplomatic win was not starting a war with the Trax for parking in the wrong asteroid belt. Captain Lee Day finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. They didn't ask for us, Minji. They asked for help on a frequency that only a species used to screaming into the void, with simple radio waves would still monitor. They sent a message in a bottle, and we're the only ones still living on the beach. He leaned forward. Tae Seok, analysis on their stated weaknesses? Kim shook his head. None. The Concord tactics are all about finesse. Precision energy beams, harmonic disruptions, psychic dampening fields. The swarm adapts to it in minutes. It's like trying to stop a flood with a laser. Park Ji-hai pointed at the screen. But look here, where the swarm hit that crystalline city. It went for the big power sources, the fancy structures. It ignored this. Rubble. The simple broken stone. Lee Day nodded slowly. A thought was forming, ugly and practical. On Earth, humanity had not survived by being the strongest or the smartest. They had survived by being the most stubborn, the most adaptable, and sometimes the most brutally simple. They came from a death world, a planet of earthquakes, blizzards, predators, and relentless gravity. Their technology reflected that overbuilt, redundant, often crude, but durable. The order from Sol Command came through. It was not a question. It was a deployment. The Grit was the closest ship with the right crew, the first planetary adaptation corps. The press called them Deathworlders. The name had stuck. As the Grit turned towards the coordinates. The crew prepared. There were no grand speeches. Park Ji-hai checked her squad's gear-heavy, sealed combat suits with ceramic composite plating, not energy shields. Their primary weapons were coil guns, magnetic rails that fired solid metal slugs at devastating speeds. Simple kinetics. She packed extra blocks of chemical explosives. Kim Tae-seok fortified the ship's systems, rerouting power, strengthening the already thick hull plating. We're not fast. We're not pretty. But we're a tough nut to crack, he muttered to himself. Choi Min-ji prepared the suite for extreme interference. She set up backup systems, low-frequency radio, even simple light signal protocols. If the fancy stuff fails, we go back to basics, she said, her voice calm. The jump through warped space was rough, the Grit groaning in protest. They emerged into a scene of silent, glittering tragedy. The Niverian system was beautiful and broken. The planet itself, seen from space, was a jewel of soft blues and shimmering greens, now marred by ugly, spreading gray scars. The swarm, debris fields of elegant, crystalline ships floated like shattered chandeliers. A few surviving Concord vessels, sleek and graceful, hovered far from the planet. Helpless. A new signal pierced the comms. A visual appeared on the screen. Ambassador Narail of the Niverians was a being of delicate beauty, with skin like polished birch and large, luminous eyes that held a universe of sorrow. They spoke, their voice a melodic chime translated into stiff English. Salutations, unknown vessel. We are grateful for your response. The devourer has consumed the harmonics of our defenses. The great song of our world is fading. We beg of you, can your people restore the frequency of peace? Can you sing a song of harmony to quiet the devourer? Lee Day stared at the desperate ambassador. He thought of Park Ji-hai's coil guns and Kim's blocks of C-12. He thought of the simple, solid slug of tungsten that was their answer to most problems. Ambassador Narail, Lee Day said, his gravelly voice a harsh contrast to the Niverian's music. We read your situation. We are the Uns Grit from Earth. We're to help. There was a flicker of hope in Nariel's eyes, then confusion. Your ship. Its form is most robust. Your energy signature is curiously dense. What is your proposed method of harmonic realignment? On the bridge, Kim Tae-seok snorted softly. Park Ji-hai didn't smile. Our method is still being determined, Lee Dae said carefully. But help is coming. Please secure your people. This may get loud. He closed the channel. He turned to his crew. The planet loomed large on the screen, its beauty defiled. They want a symphony, Lee Dae said. We're going to give them a hammer. Park, ready your team. We drop in 30. Simple rules. If it moves and it's not Niverian, you put a round in it. If it's big, you blow it up. We assess on the ground. The grit began its descent, pushing through the outer layers of the thin, clean atmosphere. It did not glide. It plunged, a blunt instrument falling towards a delicate problem. The first tendrils of the swarm, sensing new technology, new energy, new food, detached from the planet's surface and rose to meet them. A stream of greenish bioplasma shot up from the planet. It struck the grit's forward hull. The ship shuddered. Alarms blared. Hull integrity at 92%, Kim Tae-seok reported, sounding almost bored. Plasma is corrosive, but the ablative plating is handling it. They're eating through, but slowly. Too slowly. From a viewport on their frail shuttle, Ambassador Narail watched the human ship take the hit. They saw no shimmering shield, no elegant dispersion field. They saw blackened, scorched metal. They waited for the ship to explode, to die like all the others. The grit kept flying, its path unwavering. A second plasma bolt hit. More scorching. More alarms. Narail heard a human voice over an open channel they had found, a young male's voice from the human ship. Wow, is that all you've got? The acid rain back home is worse than this. The human vessel, scarred and smoking, continued its relentless fall towards the heart of the nightmare. It was not a graceful savior. It was an object of pure, stubborn momentum. And for the first time since the Devourer came, a flicker of something other than despair stirred in Ambassador Narail. It was the beginning of understanding, cold and strange. This was not help as the galaxy knew it. This was something else entirely. The Deathworlders had arrived.